Commander Jake Morrison stood at the wide window of the UES Defiant and watched the giant space station grow larger as they approached. The station was bigger than anything humans had ever built before. It looked like a metal city floating in space with thousands of lights blinking across its surface. This was where the Galactic Council met to decide things for the entire galaxy. Jake felt proud as he looked at his ship. The UES Defiant was the newest and best warship that Earth had ever made. It was over 1 kilometer long and covered with weapons. The ship had railguns that could shoot metal slugs at incredible speeds. It had missile pods filled with explosives. It had energy shields to protect it from attacks. To Jake and his crew, this ship was the most powerful thing they had ever seen. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Commander Morrison, this is Ambassador Lisa Parker. We're about to enter the council chamber. I wanted you to know that the presentation is about to begin." Jake nodded even though she couldn't see him. "Good luck, Ambassador. We're all counting on you." Lisa Parker had been Earth's representative to the galaxy for 2 years now. She was smart and tough, but Jake could tell she was nervous about today. Today was the day when Earth would ask to join the Galactic Council's defense coalition. If they said yes, human ships would help protect the galaxy from threats. If they said no, Earth would remain alone and unprotected. The council chamber was enormous. It could hold representatives from hundreds of different alien species. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the top. Holographic displays showed images and data from all over the galaxy. Ambassador Parker walked to the center of the chamber where a platform waited for her. The aliens around her looked like nothing she had ever imagined. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others looked like they were made of crystal or pure energy. They were beings that floated in the air without any visible means of support. There were creatures that seemed to be made of metal and circuits. Despite their different appearances, they all had one thing in common when they looked at the human representative. They all seemed amused. "Honored council members," Lisa began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers. "I am here to present humanity's request to join your defense coalition. We believe our military capabilities would be a valuable addition to your forces." A holographic display appeared above her head, showing the UES Defiant in all its glory. The image rotated slowly so everyone could see the ship from every angle. The weapons were clearly visible. The armor plating gleamed under the lights. The fusion reactors glowed with contained power. The reaction was immediate and not what Lisa had hoped for. A sound like laughter began to fill the chamber. It came from dozens of different species, each with their own way of expressing amusement. Some made clicking sounds, others vibrated their bodies. A few released gases that changed color. Ambassador Zexhai of the Corvette Empire was the first to speak. He looked like a giant octopus with purple skin and eyes that glowed green. His tentacles moved in patterns that his translator turned into words. "These primitive constructs," he said, his voice carrying clear amusement. "They still use kinetic projectiles and chemical propulsion. How delightfully archaic." The laughter grew louder. A being that looked like it was made of living crystal chimed in. The sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but the translation was anything but gentle. "Their largest vessel is smaller than our escort fighters. Do they expect to contribute meaningfully to galactic defense with such toys?" Lisa felt her face grow hot with embarrassment, but she kept her expression neutral. She had been trained. For this, she knew the aliens would not be impressed at first. What she hadn't expected was the level of contempt they were showing. Back on the UES Defiant, Admiral Ryan Kelly watched the proceedings through a video feed. He was a career military man who had spent his life preparing for war. He had helped design the weapon systems on the human fleet. He knew exactly how deadly these ships could be. Watching the aliens dismiss them as toys made his hands clench into fists. "Sir," said Lieutenant Commander Alex Cooper, the ship's weapons. "Officer, are we really going to let them talk about our ships like that?" Kelly shook his head. "We follow orders, Cooper. The ambassador is handling this." But it was clear that the ambassador was not handling it well. The aliens continued their criticism with increasing boldness. A creature that looked like it was made of pure energy and had no solid form spoke next. Perhaps we could assign them to cargo runs. Their ships might be adequate for transporting supplies to real military vessels. The laughter that followed was so loud that the chamber's sound dampeners had to activate to keep it from becoming painful. Lisa felt like she was standing in the middle of a cosmic joke and she was the punchline. "Your weapons," said another alien, this one covered in scales and standing on 6 legs, "they fire simple metal projectiles. We abandoned such crude methods millions of years ago. Our ships can bend space and time. We can phase through dimensions. We can manipulate matter at the quantum level. What exactly do you think your primitive firearms could accomplish against such technology?" The alien representatives began showing holographic displays of their own ships. The Corvan vessels were enormous, city-sized constructs that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The Zarian collective ships looked like they were made of pure mathematics, their surfaces constantly shifting between different geometric patterns. The Altarian Federation showed sleek vessels that could apparently travel faster than light by folding space around them. Compared to these marvels of advanced technology, the human ships looked like ancient relics. The UES Defiant, which had seemed so impressive when it left Earth, now looked like a wooden club next to a laser sword. "I believe," said the voidling delegate, a being that seemed to be made of living shadow, "that we have heard enough. Shall we vote on humanity's request?" The vote was swift and decisive. By a margin of 437 to 0, the Galactic Council voted to grant humanity provisional auxiliary status. The official wording made it sound important, but everyone in the chamber knew what it really meant. Humans would be glorified space truckers, carrying supplies and ferrying passengers, while the real military forces handled actual defense. Ambassador Parker accepted the decision with as much grace as she could manage. "Earth thanks the Council for this opportunity to serve," she said, but her voice carried a slight tremor that everyone noticed. As the session ended and the aliens began to file out of the chamber, their conversations continued to focus on the amusing primitiveness of human technology. They spoke of kinetic weapons like they were stone axes. They discussed human armor like it was made of paper. They treated the entire human military as a curiosity from a less advanced age. None of them could have imagined that within 3 months, those same primitive weapons would be the only thing standing between them and total annihilation. Captain Sam Rodriguez was sitting in his command chair aboard the UES Defiant when the emergency signal came through. The ship had been on routine patrol along the outer edge of the galaxy for 3 months since the humiliating meeting with the Galactic Council. Sam and his crew had been doing exactly what the aliens expected them to do, carrying supplies and patrolling empty space while the real military forces handled important work. The signal was different from anything they had received before. It was broadcasting on all frequencies at once, and the message was simple but terrifying. "This is Admiral Tissera of the Altarian Federation to all vessels in the Outer Rim. We are under attack. The Draktor Horde has entered our galaxy. All ships are ordered to fall back to defensive positions immediately." Sam had heard stories about the Draktor but had never believed they were real. According to the legends, they were a race of warriors who had consumed entire galaxies. They traveled in massive fleets of living ships that could adapt to any threat. They had been moving through the universe for millions of years, destroying everything in their path. "Sir," said Lieutenant Commander Alex Cooper from the weapons station, "long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures moving in from the Andromeda Galaxy. Whatever it is, it's big." Sam stood up from his chair and walked to the main display screen. The image showed space that should have been empty, but now it was filled with thousands of moving objects. They were too far away to see clearly, but the computer was calculating their size and speed. The numbers didn't make sense. "Cooper, run those calculations again," Sam ordered. Cooper's fingers moved quickly over his controls. "I've run them 3 times, sir." The largest objects are over 50 kilometers long. They're moving at zero point 0.7 light speed and they're not slowing down. The communication system crackled with more emergency messages. Ships from all over the galaxy were reporting the same thing. The Draktor had arrived and they were destroying everything they encountered. The messages came faster and faster, each one more desperate than the last. This is the Corvan battle group Zephyr. We are under attack. Their ships are like nothing we have ever seen. They appear to be alive. Our phase weapons are having no effect. Request immediate assistance. Zarian Collective Vessel Harmony 2. All ships. The enemy is adapting to our reality manipulation technology. Repeat, they are adapting in real time. Fall back immediately. Altarian Federation command to all vessels. The outer defense perimeter has been breached. The Draktor are advancing on all fronts. Estimate 3 weeks until they reach the core worlds. Sam felt a chill run down his spine. The same aliens who had laughed at human weapons 3 months ago were now being torn apart by an enemy they couldn't fight. He opened a channel to Earth Command. This is Captain Rodriguez aboard the UES Defiant. We're receiving reports of a massive invasion. Request orders. The response came back within minutes. Captain Rodriguez, this is Admiral Ryan Kelly, all. Human vessels are ordered to maintain current positions and continue observation. Do not engage the enemy under any circumstances. We need to gather intelligence before we act. Sam understood the order, but it felt wrong to just sit and watch while the galaxy burned. His crew felt the same way. They had joined the military to protect people, not to run supply missions while others did the fighting. Over the next few days, the reports became more and more disturbing. The Draktor ships were not just defeating the galactic military forces. They were learning from every battle. Every weapon that was used against them became less effective over time. Every tactic that worked once never worked again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was broadcast across the galaxy. Ambassador Lisa Parker watched from Earth, as the same beings who had mocked humanity's primitive technology now faced their own destruction. The chamber that had been filled with laughter 3 months ago was now filled with panic. The situation is desperate, reported Admiral Tessara. Her melodious voice, which had been so confident during the human presentation, now shook with fear. Our conventional weapons are completely ineffective. The Draktor ships appear to be living organisms that can evolve in real time. They adapt to our energy signatures, our phase capabilities, and our dimensional manipulation technology. The holographic displays showed the battle reports from the front lines. Corvan ships that could exist in multiple dimensions were being torn apart by biomechanical weapons. Zarian vessels that could bend reality itself were being destroyed by enemies that seemed to exist outside normal space and time. Altarian ships that could travel faster than light were being caught and destroyed by creatures that could apparently do the same thing. We have lost 40% of our combined fleets, continued the Admiral. The Draktor are advancing on all fronts. Our most advanced weapons are useless against them. They learn from every attack and develop countermeasures within hours. Ambassador Zexhai, the Corvan who had laughed loudest at human technology, spoke next. His tentacles were no longer moving in confident patterns. Instead, they twitched nervously as he spoke. We have tried everything. Phase weapons, quantum disruptors, reality bombs, dimensional shields, nothing works. They adapt to everything we throw at them. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the disaster became clear. The most advanced military forces in the galaxy were helpless against an enemy that could evolve faster than they could develop new weapons. For the first time in galactic history, the Council faced the possibility of total defeat. That's when Ambassador Parker stood up. The aliens turned to look at her with the same dismissive expressions they had worn 3 months ago, but now there was something else in their eyes. Desperation. The Council declined our military assistance 3 months ago, she said calmly. You said our weapons were primitive and our ships were toys? But perhaps it's time to reconsider that decision. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some aliens argued that human weapons would be even less effective than their own advanced technology. Others insisted that primitive kinetic weapons couldn't possibly succeed where quantum manipulation had failed. But underneath the arguments, everyone could hear the fear in their voices. "You don't understand," said the Zarian representative, its crystalline form vibrating with stress. "These creatures adapt to everything. If our most advanced weapons are useless, what could your primitive technology possibly accomplish?" Ambassador Parker smiled for the first time in months. "Maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe they adapt to advanced technology because that's all they've ever faced. Maybe they've never encountered anything primitive enough to catch them off guard." The silence that followed was different from the dismissive quiet of 3 months ago. This time, the aliens were actually considering what she had said. For the first time since the invasion began, someone had offered them hope, even if it came from the species they had mocked as primitive cargo haulers. Admiral Ryan Kelly stood in the war room aboard the U.S. Valiant, humanity's command ship, and studied the holographic display that showed the approaching Drachter fleet. The images were terrifying. Thousands of ships that looked more like giant insects than spacecraft were moving through space toward the core worlds of the galaxy. Each ship was different from the others, as if they had all evolved separately, but they all shared the same organic appearance that made them look alive. "Tell me what we know about these creatures," Kelly said to Dr. Helen Martinez, the fleet's chief expert on alien biology. Dr. Martinez activated her own display and pointed to the detailed scans of the Drachter vessels. "They're not just ships, Admiral, they're living organisms. Each one is a creature that has been bred and evolved for warfare over millions of years. They can change their structure, their weapons, and their defenses based on what they encounter in battle." Captain Maria Santos, commander of the UES Retribution, leaned forward to get a better look at the images. "You're saying they learn from every fight?" "More than that," Dr. Martinez replied. "They evolve in real time. When the Corvan Empire used phase weapons against them, the Drachter ships developed the ability to exist in multiple dimensions. When the Zarian Collective used reality manipulation, the creatures learned to bend space and time themselves. Every weapon that's used against them becomes less effective over time." Kelly nodded slowly as he began to understand the problem. "So they've adapted to every advanced weapon in the galaxy. What about our weapons?" "That's the interesting part, Doctor," Martinez said with a slight smile. "They adapt to threats they encounter, but they've been fighting advanced civilizations for millions of years. They've never encountered anything like our approach to warfare." Captain Sam Rodriguez, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. What do you mean by our approach?" Kelly walked to another display that showed human weapon systems. "Think about it. Every civilization in this galaxy abandoned kinetic weapons millions of years ago. They moved on to energy weapons, phase technology, and quantum manipulation. But we're still throwing rocks." "Very fast rocks," added Lieutenant Commander Alex Cooper with a grin. "Exactly," Kelly continued. "The Drachter have evolved to counter exotic weapons and dimensional warfare. They've developed immunities to energy manipulation and reality distortion. But they've never faced simple kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives." Dr. Martinez pulled up more data on her screen. "Look at their defensive evolution. They've developed shields that can deflect particle beams, armor that can phase through energy attacks, and hull modifications that can absorb quantum disruption. But there's no evidence they've ever needed to develop defenses against solid projectiles." The room fell silent as everyone began to understand what this meant. The most advanced military forces in the galaxy had been defeated by an enemy that could adapt to their sophisticated weapons. But that same enemy might be completely vulnerable to the primitive weapons that humanity still used. "Are you saying," Captain Santos asked slowly, "that our railguns and missiles might actually work against these things?" "I'm saying they might work better than anything else that's been tried," Kelly replied. "The Drachter adapt to exotic particles and subspace distortions, but they can't adapt to having their molecular structure disrupted by kinetic impact. Physics is physics, regardless of how evolved you think you are. Kelly gave orders for the entire human fleet to begin an unprecedented retrofit. Every ship was to be loaded with solid ammunition. The railguns that the aliens had mocked were loaded with depleted uranium rounds that could punch through almost any material. The missile pods were filled with simple, high-explosive warheads that released their energy through chemical reactions rather than exotic matter manipulation. Cooper supervised the loading of the weapons aboard the UES Defiant. "Sir, we're also loading our nuclear arsenal. These aren't the antimatter bombs or exotic matter weapons the galaxy uses. These are simple fission and fusion warheads." "Good," Kelly replied. "They can adapt to exotic particles and dimensional distortions, but they can't adapt to having their atoms rearranged by nuclear fusion. That's not evolution, that's just physics." The human fleet worked around the clock to prepare for battle. Ships that had been designed to carry advanced weapons were stripped down and refitted with the most basic armaments humanity could produce. Railguns were calibrated to fire solid slugs at maximum velocity. Missile systems were loaded with conventional explosives. Nuclear weapons that hadn't been used in centuries were brought out of storage and prepared for deployment. "This feels wrong," said Captain Rodriguez as he watched his crew load simple steel projectiles into the ship's weapons. "We're going into battle against the most advanced enemy in the galaxy with weapons that are thousands of years old. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions," Kelly replied over the communication system. "The Draktor have spent millions of years learning to counter advanced technology. They've never had to learn to counter a rock thrown really hard." Look. Intelligence reports that came in over the next few hours painted a clear picture of the enemy's capabilities. The Draktor ships could phase through solid matter, making them immune to most physical attacks. They could absorb energy weapons and use that energy to power their own systems. They could manipulate space and time to avoid attacks or to strike at targets that should have been out of range, but every defensive adaptation they had developed was designed to counter the advanced weapons of galactic civilization. Their phase shifting was keyed to energy frequencies. Their absorption capabilities were designed for exotic particles. Their space-time manipulation was meant to counter dimensional weapons. "Look at this," Dr. Martinez said, pointing to a tactical analysis on her screen. "Their hulls are designed to phase through energy attacks, but that same phasing ability might make them more vulnerable to kinetic impact. If a solid projectile hits them while they're partially phased, it could cause massive internal damage." Kelly studied the data and nodded. "What about their adaptive capabilities? Won't they just evolve to counter our weapons once they encounter them?" "That's the beauty of it," Dr. Martinez replied. "Evolution takes time, even for them. They can adapt to exotic weapons quickly because they've encountered similar threats before. But kinetic weapons and chemical explosives are so primitive that they might not even recognize them as threats until it's too late." The final preparations were completed just as the Draktor fleet reached the outer edge of the Rigel system. The human ships took their positions alongside what remained of the galactic defense forces. The aliens were still skeptical about humanity's chances, but desperation had made them willing to try anything. "All ships, this is Admiral Kelly," came the voice over the fleet communication system. "We're about to test a theory that could save the galaxy or get us all killed. Remember, we're not trying to out-technology the enemy. We're trying to out-primitive them. Sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective one." The battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was going into it armed with nothing more than rocks, explosives, and the hope that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. The Rigel system had never seen anything like the fleet that gathered there. Ships from every major civilization in the galaxy floated in formation, their hulls gleaming with the light of the system's twin stars. The Corvan vessels looked like floating cities with their multiple dimensional phases. The Zarian ships appeared to be made of living mathematics, their surfaces constantly shifting between geometric patterns. The Altarian fleet showed off their sleek designs that could fold space around them docked, and then there were the human ships. Compared to the magnificent alien vessels, they looked like crude metal boxes. But Captain Sam Rodriguez felt proud as he looked at his fleet. The UES Defiant and her sister ships might not look as impressive as the alien technology, but they were loaded with weapons that had been tested in countless battles on Earth. "All ships, this is Admiral Tazara," came the voice over the fleet. Communication system. "Long-range sensors show the Draker fleet approaching. They will be in weapons range in 30 minutes. All vessels prepare for combat." Rodriguez walked to the main display screen and watched as the enemy fleet came into view. The Draker ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. They looked like enormous insects or sea creatures, with hulls that seemed to pulse and breathe. Some had tentacles that writhed through space. Others had wings that appeared to be made of living tissue. All of them radiated a sense of ancient evil that made his crew nervous. "Sir," said Lieutenant Commander Alex Cooper from the weapons station, "the alien ships are beginning their attack run." The battle began exactly as everyone expected it would. The Corvan Empire's phase ships opened fire first, sending waves of dimensional energy toward the Draker fleet. The beams of pure mathematics from the Zarian Collective followed, trying to rewrite the reality around the enemy ships. The Altarian Federation's gravity weapons attempted to crush the organic vessels with the force of collapsed stars. For a few minutes, it looked like the combined alien fleet might actually win. The Draker ships were taking damage and several of the smaller ones were destroyed. Rodriguez felt a moment of hope as he watched the exotic weapons tear into the enemy formation. Then everything changed. The Draker ships began to adapt. Rodriguez watched in horror as the enemy hulls started to shift and change. The vessels that had been solid became partially transparent, allowing the phase weapons to pass harmlessly through them. The ships that had been normal matter began to exist in multiple dimensions at once, making them immune to the reality manipulation weapons. "This is impossible," said Captain Maria Santos over the communication channel. "They're adapting faster than we thought possible." The Draker counterattack was swift and devastating. Biomechanical weapons that looked like living tentacles reached out from the enemy ships and tore through the alien fleet. The Corvan vessels, which had seemed so powerful, were ripped apart by weapons that existed in the same multiple dimensions as their hulls. The Zarian ships found their reality-bending capabilities turned against them as the Draker learned to manipulate space and time. Within 20 minutes, the entire galactic fleet was in retreat. Ships that had taken centuries to build were being destroyed in seconds. The most advanced military technology in the galaxy was being rendered useless by an enemy that could evolve faster than they could adapt their tactics. "Admiral Kelly, this is Admiral Tissara," came the panicked voice over the communication system. "We are falling back. The enemy has adapted to all our weapons. Recommend immediate retreat." Rodriguez expected to hear the order to withdraw, but instead he heard something else entirely. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Kelly, weapons free. Execute Attack Plan Alpha." The UES Defiant moved forward as the alien ships retreated around them. Rodriguez felt his heart pounding as his small fleet advanced toward an enemy that had just defeated the most powerful military force in the galaxy. But he trusted his admiral, and he trusted his weapons. "Cooper, target the largest enemy ship," Rodriguez ordered. "Load armor-piercing rounds and fire when ready." The railgun fired with a sound like thunder. The tungsten rod, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, shot toward the Draker flagship. Rodriguez watched the projectile streak across space and held his breath. The impact was spectacular. The solid metal rod punched through the organic hull of the enemy ship like it was made of paper. The Draker vessel, which had been adapting to energy weapons and dimensional attacks, had no defense against simple kinetic impact. The projectile tore through the ship's interior, causing massive damage. "Direct hit," Cooper reported with excitement in his voice. "The enemy ship is venting atmosphere and showing signs of internal explosions." Rodriguez couldn't believe what he was seeing. The same enemy that had shrugged off the galaxy's most advanced weapons was being torn apart by a simple metal rod fired from a railgun. load high explosive rounds, and target the next ship. The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Missiles packed with conventional explosives streaked toward the Drachter ships. The organic vessels tried to adapt, growing thicker armor and developing energy-absorbing tissues. But every adaptation they made was designed to counter the advanced weapons they had faced before. The Drachter ships had no idea how to defend against weapons that worked through simple physics. Their hulls could phase through energy beams, but they couldn't phase through solid matter without taking damage. Their adaptive systems could absorb exotic particles, but they couldn't absorb the kinetic energy of a metal slug traveling at incredible speed. Captain Santos, commanding the UES Retribution, scored the next major hit. Her ship's missile barrage overwhelmed a medium-sized Drachter vessel that had been trying to adapt to the human attacks. The conventional explosives detonated against the organic hull, causing massive structural damage. "This is working," Santos reported over the communication channel. "The enemy doesn't know how to counter our weapons." But the Drachter were not giving up. The surviving ships began to change again, developing new defenses against the human weapons. Some grew thicker armor plating. Others developed the ability to move faster through space. A few began to sprout what looked like point defense systems, designed to shoot down incoming projectiles. Rodriguez realized that the enemy was starting to adapt to their weapons just like they had adapted to the alien technology. The human fleet needed to end this battle quickly before the Drachter could evolve effective countermeasures. "All ships, this is Admiral Kelly," came the voice over the communication system. "Execute final phase. Deploy nuclear weapons." Commander Kate Sullivan, piloting the U's Vengeance, had been waiting for this moment. Her ship carried the largest nuclear arsenal in the human fleet. These weren't the exotic matter bombs or antimatter weapons that the galaxy preferred. These were simple fission and fusion warheads that released energy through the most basic forces in the universe. The nuclear missiles launched in a coordinated barrage toward the Drachter command cluster. The enemy ships tried to adapt, developing energy shields and radiation absorption capabilities, but there was no adapting to nuclear weapons. The forces involved were too fundamental, too basic for evolution to counter. The explosions lit up the Rigel system like new stars being born. The Drachter command ships, unable to adapt to the fundamental forces of atomic decay, were vaporized in brilliant flashes of pure energy. The remaining enemy vessels, cut off from their leaders and unable to coordinate their adaptive responses, fell to the continued barrage of human weapons. Within an hour, the battle was over. The Drachter horde, which had consumed galaxies and terrorized the universe for millions of years, had been completely destroyed by weapons that were thousands of years old. The human fleet, which had been dismissed as primitive cargo haulers, had achieved the impossible. The Galactic Council chamber was quiet for the first time in its recorded history. The same beings who had filled this room with laughter 3 months ago now sat in stunned silence, as they watched the tactical displays showing the complete destruction of the Drachter horde. The enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years had been wiped out in a single battle. Not by the most advanced weapons in the universe, not by exotic technology that could bend reality itself, but by simple kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Ambassador Lisa Parker stood at the center of the chamber, just as she had 3 months ago when she had asked for humanity to join the Defense Coalition. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. The aliens who had mocked her presentation now looked at her with expressions that ranged from shock to embarrassment to newfound respect. "The human fleet has successfully eliminated the Drachter threat," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "We are prepared to discuss our full membership in the Galactic Council." As equals, the silence stretched on for several more minutes before Ambassador Zexhai of the Kolran Empire finally spoke. His tentacles, which had moved so confidently during the first meeting, now twitched nervously as he addressed the human representative. "We must apologize for our previous assessment of your military capabilities. We underestimated the effectiveness of kinetic warfare. Your species' approach to combat is unique in the galaxy." "Not unique," came the voice of Admiral Ryan Kelly as his image appeared on the holographic display. Practical? Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective. 1. While you were developing weapons that could manipulate reality and bend spacetime, we kept perfecting the art of throwing rocks really hard. The crystalline being representing the Zarian collective chimed in harmonics that carried tones of embarrassment. We had assumed that technological advancement meant abandoning primitive methods. We failed to consider that some methods remain effective regardless of technological level. Our calculations show that if we had retained kinetic weapons in our arsenal, we might have been able to defeat the Draktor ourselves. Dr. Helen Martinez appeared on another holographic display to address the council. The Draktor had evolved to counter every form of advanced warfare in the galaxy. They had developed defenses against energy weapons, phase technology, reality manipulation, and dimensional attacks. But they had never encountered a species that still used ballistic weapons and chemical explosives. She activated a display that showed the analysis of the battle. Their adaptation was actually their weakness. They had optimized their evolutionary responses for complexity and couldn't handle simplicity. When faced with weapons that worked, through basic physics rather than exotic science, their adaptive systems had no template to work from. The Altarian Federation representative, Admiral Tusara, spoke next. Her melodious voice carried a note of genuine admiration. In all our military academies, we teach that the most advanced weapon is always superior to the primitive one. Today, humanity has shown us that this assumption was incorrect. Your weapons succeeded precisely because they were simple, not in spite of it. Captain Sam Rodriguez joined the holographic conference from the bridge of the UES Defiant. With respect, Admiral, I think you're missing the point. Our weapons didn't work because they were simple. They worked because they were effective. We never stopped using kinetic weapons because they never stopped working. Every civilization in the galaxy abandoned them in favor of more complicated technology, but complicated doesn't always mean better. The vote for humanity's full membership in the Galactic Council was unanimous. Not a single voice was raised in opposition. The species that had been dismissed as primitive cargo haulers were now being welcomed as the galaxy's most effective military force, but the changes went far beyond simple membership. The Council voted to restructure the entire galactic defense system with humanity at its center. Human ships would be stationed in every major system. Human weapons technology would be shared with allied species. Human military doctrine would be taught in alien academies across the galaxy. This represents a fundamental shift in how we approach galactic defense, announced the Council President, a being of pure energy that had previously dismissed human technology as archaic. We have learned that technological superiority is not always the answer to military threats. Sometimes the most effective approach is the most straightforward one. Admiral Kelly addressed the Council directly. We're honored by your confidence in us, but we want to be clear about something. We're not magic. Our weapons work because we understand their limitations and we use them effectively. The same principles that make kinetic weapons effective can be applied to any technology, advanced or primitive. Over the following weeks, the changes became visible throughout the galaxy. Human warships took up positions alongside alien vessels in every major defense fleet. The sight of crude metal ships floating next to reality-bending alien technology became common. But no one laughed anymore when they saw the human vessels. Captain Maria Santos found herself in command of a mixed fleet that included both human ships and alien vessels. It's strange, she told her crew during a briefing. 6 months ago, the aliens thought we were too primitive to be useful. Now they're asking us to teach them how to fight. The cultural impact was just as significant as the military changes. Across the galaxy, civilizations began to reconsider their abandonment of older technologies. Museums that had displayed kinetic weapons as ancient curiosities suddenly found themselves hosting military researchers who wanted to understand how these simple devices worked. The Corvan Empire began developing new hybrid weapons that combined their phase technology with human kinetic principles. The Zarian collective started experimenting with reality-manipulated projectile weapons. The Altarian Federation designed new ships that could launch conventional missiles through folded space, but perhaps the most important change was in attitude. The galaxy had learned that newer was not always better, that complex was not always superior, and that there was wisdom in understanding the basics before moving on to advanced concepts. Ambassador Parker concluded her address to the Council with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Humanity has always believed that the best tool for any job is the one that works. We never abandoned kinetic weapons because they never stopped being effective. We hope that our example will remind the galaxy that progress doesn't always mean complexity. Admiral Rodriguez, now promoted to Fleet Admiral in recognition of his role in the victory, established the new Human Naval Academy on the Council Station. Students from across the galaxy came to learn not just about human weapons, but about human thinking. They learned that sometimes the most advanced solution was to step back and use the simplest approach that would work. The laughter had stopped permanently. When alien species encountered human warships now, they felt something entirely different. They felt safe. The crude metal boxes that had once been dismissed as primitive toys were now recognized as the most effective military vessels. In the galaxy and in the depths of space, where new threats might someday emerge, the galaxy now had protectors who understood that the best weapon was not necessarily the most advanced one, but the one that could get the job done. Humanity had taught the universe that sometimes the oldest wisdom was the most valuable, and that throwing rocks really hard would never go out of style.